Hello and welcome to another special edition of The Classroom Connection, the show that takes you inside Marion County Public Schools. I'm Kevin Christian, your host, and today your moderator for the program. You may recall over the last few months we have presented budget issues, ideas, and cost-cutting measures to you here on The Classroom Connection. But today we say with certainty what these cuts will be because the school board recently approved a budget for this school year of nearly $478 million. Now, the people who know this budget best join me now to talk about all of the details. Those people include Superintendent Jim Yancey. Good to see you here today.
Thanks.
School Board Chair Judy Zanetti.
Hello, Kevin.
Who led the decision. And also our Executive Director of Business Services, Teresa Boston Ellis.
Hi, Kevin.
And she's brought her financial Bible with her. You'll see it there on the table. But we're going to just talk about the budget and share some cuts with our audience today and hopefully help you better understand what goes into operating an entire school district with about $64 million less than what was in the budget last year. So I guess my first question will be, and Mr. Yancey, you're closest, so you get the first one. Were you surprised, or are you surprised at how much money we actually had to cut from the budget? Now, this is looking back over the last year and a half since we really knew that this year was going to be a detrimental year.
Well, remember a lot of the money is capital dollars, which don't impact our day-to-day operations. In the long term, they do impact us, but since 2007, it's gradually gone down. I say gradually, it's been a pretty steep drop, actually, gone down, and I think what surprised me maybe is just that it continues to look like even next year we'll be cutting more.
It seems like we say next year's going to be worse, and we've said that for a few years
Right.
now.
I think we're down to 2002, 2003 level of the amount of money we get for a full FTE, somewhere in that range. I mean, we're really pretty low-level funding for what we've got for the number of students we have right now. And if there are more students in all the districts, meaning all around the state of Florida, we'll actually be cut again. They'll do a pro rata share cutback, and we won't get as much money as they've currently said we're going to get.
Now, one bright note is that at least at day 20, we're well above the projected number of students that we thought we would have.
Right. It's good news, because if we can hold on to those students till October during FTE week, around October 15th, that period of time, then we should be able to recoup all of our funding for what we've had to purchase. By that I mean additional teachers that we've had to put in place for this year, for the start of the year. The bad news about that is we've had to actually go and hire some more teachers. That's not bad news, but we've got to have the FTE numbers come in, the number of students you're talking about in October and February. Those are critical issues for us. Otherwise, we have to reduce staff somehow. At that point, we'd have to do that.
Mrs. Zanetti, you are elected to the school board, so you're out and about. I know you talk with parents on a regular basis and taxpayers and voters. What do they not understand about this whole budget process?
I think one of the things, Kevin, is, as Mr. Yancey said, we're back to about our 2003-2004 spending limit for students, or spending allocation for students, and in that time, from that day to this, the amount of unfunded or underfunded mandates that we're required to implement has grown exponentially. Just class size amendment, just for an example, has cost us an overwhelming amount of money. So it's having things that we are forced by legislation or law, federal or state, to implement in our schools. There's a lot of things that we would do differently if the choice was ours, and maybe ways in which we would spend the money differently.
And we're going to talk about unfunded mandates in more detail in a few minutes. Teresa, you've got that Bible there in front of you, as I call it, but you don't have to look in it for this. What's the hardest hit area that we have this year when it comes to our budget?
Oh, there's so many hard hit areas, but predominantly I would say our salary and benefits. Our fringe benefits, we were allowed to offset some of the increase in fringe benefits by a reduction in the retirement rate. Right. But we had an increase in health insurance. I think that our departments were hard hit. We're not allowing hiring for department budgets. We've cut the budgets for departments back about $8 million from last year.
I know that.
So that will be a challenge this year to get everything done supporting the classroom at the same time with fewer dollars.
These next series of questions I'm just going to throw out. Any of you can chime in, or all of you can chime in. Teresa, you mentioned personnel. You know, we for a couple of years now have not been replacing people when they leave. At the district level, we're certainly replacing teachers, I would think, as they leave. But what are some of those positions that people don't realize, A, exist, and B, don't realize the value in what they do?
Well, the one they realize the value, probably realize the value, are the 8 assistant principals and coordinators that we didn't hire this year. We had some people leave the district, as well as we promoted some assistant principals, and so that gave us some openings. And we decided, for instance, in high school, not to put in place, at most of the high schools, at least 6 of them anyway, we decided not to put in place an assistant principal for instruction, which has been there for years. And so we've got one less assistant principal at most of our high schools. The only 2 exceptions are Westport and Forest High School. They still, because of the numbers of students they've still got a large staff. So that's really been a big impact administratively. But other than that, there's all kinds of areas. Teresa's down, she's down several staff members in,
right.
I would say 3, is it 3?
Right. We're down 3 in purchasing.
Yeah.
In finance, we're down 3 people. Again, as you said, as people retire or leave, we're not replacing those units. And those were very critical to making sure the system worked. And what we've done is reallocated work duties, so that's requiring people to step up. We've lost dollars in funding and units in technology, transportation, and there were some other areas in technical services as well, where we're just not replacing the unit, and it's requiring other people to pick up the extra load.
How long can we do this? Because at some point, somebody says, I just can't do any more work. I'm already overloaded.
We've got one position we've got to replace already that's in the purchasing area.
Correct.
We have to do that. We have to have a leader of that group, and there's no way for the expertise that position requires for somebody else to do another job and that job. So we just know that there are going to be exceptions to it, but almost everywhere else you look, I mean, obviously in custodial services, outsourcing is the same thing as not replacing those people in a lot of cases. And we've had it, well, throughout. It doesn't matter whether it's staff development, anywhere. Your departments, we've got people like you doing 2 jobs, just like now we've got Julie Shealy who's taking over kind of
foundation.
Yeah, the foundation, as well as what she currently does, which is evaluate principals and do lots of other things that we give her. So we have lots of staff members at the district level who are doing a multitude of jobs. And I've had comments from principals as I've visited schools. I've actually, just yesterday, I had somebody tell me that, well, we can't get any help right now, much help from the county office, because everybody's so busy doing other things. And what they mean is we can get them the help, but it's going to take us a lot longer.
Instead of this week, it's 3 weeks from
right.
now.
And I think that's...
Over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been trying to keep these cats more internal, if you will, we're trying to keep the cats out of our classroom and away from our students. And sadly, I think the floodgates have opened. As Mr. Yancey said, we've got schools that are short on administrative staff. We have students that have had to move classrooms because of class size amendment. We have had cut back on busing for magnet programs. We've already done that. We're being more strict there. And of course, you know, with our band funding this year, you know, that finally has our parents and our students are seeing what we have known and dealt with for a very long time, and it's a sad thing that they're affected by this as well.
Let's talk a little bit about that. That's one of my topics here. Marching bands in the past traditionally have received an allocation of funding from the district on top of what it takes to put the teacher in that classroom to teach those band classes and the other classes that they're responsible for, and even for purchasing some of that equipment. This year, that amounts to about $147,000 that is not being handed out to those schools. So what kind of reaction did you all hear? Did you all experience? I mean, I was there for some of it, so, but for the sake of our viewers, you know, obviously it was a big deal here.
Correct. Yeah, and they were obviously disappointed, and they have expenses, and they have always done fundraising. The bands have band boosters, and they've always done fundraising on top of what we've given them. So they were disappointed, but I really think that for this 1 year we can pull together as a community. They can work with their administrators and their other booster clubs at their schools just to make it through.
I think another surprise was that they were they thought that the athletics were supported by the districts 100%, and a lot of people found out that athletics are not supported by
nor
district
our other art programs,
or drama or any of the
so
other
football and baseball and basketball don't get money from the district?
Cheerleading, none.
Correct. And I think that was an eye opener to the band as well.
Right.
And those programs receive a lot of funding through their gate, through their ticket prices.
Correct.
Which the bands typically don't get part of.
Right. So that's maybe something that they can work with internally in their schools to see how they can work together on this.
However, some of our bands, I think most of them now, have a concession stand, just like the football boosters have a concession stand at the football game. So they do make some money off of that. So there are some opportunities out there. I don't think any of us were pleased with, we don't like making the decisions that we've had to make. I don't like any of them. I certainly didn't like being accused of killing band programs when in fact what I did was cut funding for 1 year. We still have band classes. We still have marching band. The band directors are still earning supplements, assuming they do the extracurricular requirements. And so, we've tried to keep everything in place. And as far as elementary schools, we've cut, if somebody retired or resigned since July 1, we've not filled those positions in art, music, media center, the media center, media specialist, and physical education. We've replaced them either with sharing a position between two schools or whatever the case is. And I think a lot of people don't realize that elementary ed teachers are certified to teach art, music, and physical education. So if a principal wanted to, if somebody's really concerned about they're not getting as much art as they ought to be getting, somebody at that school can teach art during that time if they really want. Any teacher that's at the school are certified to do those things, and that's a big piece that people miss. We just simply can't afford to meet class size and do everything else. And class size is what's driving this whole thing.
And I actually yesterday was at an elementary school that is sharing a music teacher. However, the principal had said that before their former music teacher left, the principal was able to have her put her lesson plans up on the employee portal so that any classroom teacher could go in there, pull out lesson plans for the weeks the students aren't being served by the music teacher, and be able to do some of those activities in the classroom.
I think it's important to point out too that people are quick to criticize which programs are suffering financially, but A, very seldom do they offer solutions other than, I think you should fund it. And B, they don't realize that there are 14 other groups that feel their program is exactly as much important or as important as whatever the program they're talking about is. So
certainly anything you teach you're passionate about and know the value of it for students, and as a parent anything your child's involved in you want to support and you believe is important because you see the value that brings to your own child.
I'm going to flip the page here. Teresa, you've been with the district how long?
17 years.
In those 17 years, in your opinion, is it easier to add funding and expand programs, or is it more difficult, is it more work to cut funding?
It's more work to cut funding.
To make the hard choices.
Yes, it's very difficult to make hard choices. It's very hard not to have empathy with departments and students and parents that are take it as if we're doing something that's a personal, exactly. And it really isn't. These are things that we have we've just taken months and months evaluating and trying to do what's best for the district. And I think the best thing that has come out of this is that people are getting more knowledgeable about school funding. And that's what I would always recommend. Learn how we are funded. We're just not giving dollars from the state. Our dollars are divided between state and local and federal funding. And we have to levy certain dollar amounts locally in order to get our state funding. So like I said, I think the best thing that has come from all of this is that folks are getting more knowledgeable and learning how our funding works.
With a budget that is significantly less than it was last year, how does the millage rate roll in this year, and how's that going to impact our property taxes? Am I going to pay more? Are you going to pay more?
Yes, we're going to pay more because, again, what is required is a local effort. And the state says, here is what you will levy in order for us to provide state funding.
So the state says you have to charge this rate, period.
Correct. That is called a required local effort.
So there's no impact, there's no decision by the local school board. They don't have any impact on it whatsoever. The school
Right.
the state says, this is what you got to do it.
Right. There are 2 discretionary millages, but there are also things tied to that. One of the discretionary millages, we get an additional funding for it if we levy it. If we don't levy it, we will lose that funding. And that was the $4.7 million that we talked about at the board meeting on the 13th. Also, our capital is a discretionary millage.
Okay.
But we are required to levy a certain dollar in order to just meet our debt payments. So we have a discretionary with those 2 millages, but not really.
People think of the school district as this deep pocket, huge, massive organization, and we are. We have 6,000 employees and a budget this year of almost $478 million. But just a few years ago, that budget was over $600 million.
Correct.
I recall that.
There was a lot more funding available, not only in capital, but in the general fund. If you recall, 2 years ago, we received the stabilization money of $13 million. We received it for 2 years in order to shore up the budget from 08-09. And then last year, we also received funding called Education Jobs, and all of that went away. So the expenses associated with that didn't go away, because what those dollars did was to help us shore up our existing expenditures, the things that we needed to hire, the teachers, pay for expenses that were really required. A lot of our funding that people don't realize either is designated funding. We'll get.
You mean they tell us, they give us the money, but they tell us how we have to spend it.
Exactly. So
Okay.
for you to say that this $477 million budget, yes, it is, but I guarantee you the majority of those funds are designated for things from reading programs to VPK, which is our voluntary pre-K program, instructional materials, transportation.
All required.
All required.
One thing that's not required are school resource officers, and I know that was a point of contention early on, but those are in the budget, correct?
They are.
Yes.
So those schools that had school resource officers last year have them now.
They do.
Okay.
That was all the board members that I talked with expressed a desire to keep those in place if we could. It's going to continue to take, as it did this year, some negotiation to keep those in place in the future exactly the way we have them now. That is a moving target, and because of increased expenses by Ocala Police Department and the Sheriff's Department. I mean, they have the same issues that we do and the same concerns, so we're all trying to work together on that.
I think I want to point out, and I'm sure you all will agree, that some people in our community expect the same level of service with significantly less amount of dollars, and that just can't happen.
Well, they're following, that's what the state of Florida believes. So they're doing exactly what they hear the state of Florida doing. They want more service with less dollars. And in fact, when Teresa was talking about the taxes earlier, we're raising, even though the millage went up, we're actually raising overall less money. So the millage rate goes up, but the amount of our property or the property values have gone down, and that's been a tough thing for everybody to swallow.
I guess my point is, at some point, it's the tipping point where people have to realize that if there's less money coming in, the same amount can't go out.
And I think that's one of the reasons that we've begun already discussing a 4-day school week for next year. It's something that we hope we don't have to move to, but if our budget projections come out as to what we believe they will be next year, we have to make some significant changes in the way we operate.
Well, that's certainly a radical one, and I think we would be the first larger size district in the country, certainly in the state, to go to four days a week. What kind of responses are you getting out in the community?
I have had very little negative feedback. There are, of course, some parents, working parents, that are concerned about what they'll do with their child on that 5th day, or the expense that it may cause them personally. But I have not heard a lot of that. I have heard from our teachers that they can make it work. Of course they can. I believe that they make everything work that we give them. Our students get a great education, but I've heard from a lot of parents, literally, that have stopped me in the street or in the grocery store to say, we hope we don't have to do it, but if this is what we have to do to continue to provide the level of service you're giving our students, then we'll work with you. And so it's been nice to at least have that support.
Mr. Yancey, you're connected with the professional community here. Any response from them?
Some of them have stated that they don't think it's a good thing for recruiting other businesses, or at least that's what I've heard. Nobody said that directly to my face. Sure. But I noticed that the EDC and the Chamber of Commerce decided to put their organizations together. Several of the things that they said when they did that, when they were discussing it, was that they needed to be innovative and think outside the box and try some new things that would save some money so that their organization could work better. Somehow, when we education decides that we're going to apply business practices to what goes on, because businesses reduce their hours, shut off a day, lay their workforce off, or cut back hours, whatever they do. We haven't done that with our personnel,
right.
But certainly we're now looking at doing something that's a little radical, that's a little outside the box, but it's been done lots of places before in smaller communities, and I would hope that I would get support from those two organizations as we move forward. There are a lot of things that I don't like about it. Do I think it's a good decision educationally? Absolutely not. I'd rather kids were in school for longer periods of time. By that I mean more days,
sure,
as many as possible. But quite frankly, as both of these ladies have stated, we just simply can't continue to provide the services we have in the past. And if we think there's going to be at least $8 million that we've got to make up, which is the jobs bill money from last year, this is only $4 million of it. Where are we still going to get the next $4 million? So we've got to come up with another big idea.
We can't do it alone. Our schools can't operate alone or in a vacuum. We need community engagement and support. We owe it to our students. We owe it to our community. As Mr. Yancey said, we're the largest, or you may have said it, Kevin, we're the largest employer in the county, so keeping our workforce employed is very important to us. We would certainly hate to add to the unemployment levels here in Marion County, which have been double digit for over 2 years now.
And that's an easy response from some people in our community. Well, these people don't do any work. You need to get rid of them. Everybody at the district office needs to take 10% pay cut. I mean, all of those little jabs have been thrown out there. You've
walked in someone's moccasins.
But even those steps wouldn't save the amount of money that we're talking about.
Correct, no.
If you eliminated all the county staff that are on the first 2 pages of our sheet, and those are people at coordinator level and above, that would be $3.9 million.
You still got $4 million to go.
And you've got me by myself, which is not going to go well for everybody. I mean, you know, there's nobody from these people. I can't rely on anybody. That's not going to go well. So,
and we do have the third lowest administrative costs in the state.
You're
so
correct.
We're pretty lean as it is. And
let's talk a little bit about technology. We are known statewide for our use of technology and certainly have extensive technology throughout the district, but even that's being cut. We're not, well, Teresa, what are we not doing now?
Well, I know we cut over $600,000 out of the technology budget this year, and that does not include units or people who are not returning. We lost a really great webmaster, I think, and well, you're very familiar with that. So that impacts the school.
That's another position that's not being replaced.
Correct.
Someone else is taking over those duties.
Correct. Okay. And all those dollars are used to support the classroom. So these are things that are not being used to support the classroom now. So it may be a department budget, but it's used to support the classrooms, whether it's smart boards or refresh equipment.
Which we're not doing.
Correct.
Back to unfunded mandates, now we have technology dollars that are being funneled into the computerized end of course exams, computerized FCAT exams.
And we're going to have to refresh, at least at the middle school level next year, which means that those dollars will be taken up somewhere else, and otherwise we won't be able to do these end of course exams. And we've got a real problem. The state of Florida has got a real problem. I won't just say Marion County. The state of Florida has got a real problem with the technology requirements for the end of course exams. They've put it in place at less cost to the state because they don't have to send these paper and pencil tests away and get them done that way, and they can do it a lot cheaper. What they haven't done is given us any funding
They've just
to
passed
make
the
up the
costs on
difference.
to us.
Yeah, that's exactly.
So we've
what's
gone
going
from
on.
paper and pencil to a minimum standard for technology that all districts have to meet. And if you don't have it, then you got to spend the money to get up there.
And the scary part is when you tie in the other pieces, facilities, the fish report, we'd have to build more computer labs. And what we're basically doing is for about 6 weeks, and I just got back from superintendent's conference, and this was one of their issues with the new commissioner. For about 6 weeks, those labs have to be occupied by students testing. So what do you do at the end of the year? Do you tell the vocational classes, oh, tough, you can't be in here for 6 weeks? You know, you've got to figure out some way to do it, and that's what we're really struggling with. And the new commissioner, of course, wasn't really aware of all of that because he's just arrived here in Florida, but it is a real issue, and it's not just in Marion County, it's all districts.
So I guess it's safe to say nobody's getting raises anytime soon. Nobody in the school district, I should say. All of you are real quiet on that one.
Well, we have to negotiate that or impose it, and we don't know. I don't see how we can do that today. But
it's hard to say that when we're asking people to do more and more, and we're giving them less and less.
The good thing we can say is we haven't laid anybody off. You know, we haven't had any. We've for people that are not doing their job, we've obviously gotten rid of, but in reality we haven't had any layoffs because of the cutbacks in the budget so far. We've been able to overcome that in almost every case. We have had some people that we weren't able to rehire, but they knew when they got some of the federal dollars that that was a 2-year contract, and that's all it was 2 years. So there have been some of those people that have run out of their contract time, but everybody knew going in what it was, and I'm really proud of our efforts. Because it has been an effort, and our commitment as a district and the board's commitment not to lay people off. I mean, we're the #1 employer in the district, and quite frankly, our numbers, what we pay people, is kind of what the EDC's targeting. You know, is what they'd like for people.
Here.
Yeah, they want at least $35,000 positions come in place, and most of our, not all of our employees, but at least all our beginning teachers make $35,000. So we feel real comfortable with the fact that we've been able to keep lots of people employed. Maybe not at what they're worth, certainly not at what they're worth, but we've been able to do that.
Well, and Mr. Yancey, to your credit, you've said from day one that your 2 main goals were to impact or limit the impact in the classroom and not lay off a single employee. And I've heard you say that for 2 or 3 years now, and I, as an employee, and speaking for the other 6,000, appreciate that approach, because it's never easy to talk about or even think about losing your job, regardless of how much you make. But when you take, like you said, the largest employer in a county, and we set the example by laying off people, it speaks loudly. So fortunately, we haven't had to speak. We haven't had to do that. So,
but we have gotten smaller.
We've gotten much smaller, much leaner, for sure.
We're a lot less of us here than there were before,
Yeah.
so that's been a big deal.
I've got about 3 minutes left. Teresa, I want to ask you real quick. A lot of people say, well, what about all the lottery dollars? You know, why can't you take those and use those? Quick answer?
Yeah, lottery's basically gone away. The lottery is used to pay for the school recognition, that A+ program. That's basically what we're dealing with. And there's some SAC money remaining, but we typically have to wait till the end of the year to see what's left over from the school recognition fund.
So let's be generous. Are we going to get $2 million this year from the lottery? $2 million?
Maybe not.
Maybe
it
not
depends
that much.
on the schools and if they make the grade. Last year we were allocated about $1.8 million.
So misconception.
Yes.
Big time. I answer that question a lot.
Yes.
Bright Futures gets most of that money.
Yep.
Yes. Exactly.
Mrs. Inetti, what's your, as the school board chair, what's your goal for people to understand about this financial crisis that we're in?
I would like people to understand that we as a district, I truly believe that our employees do everything they can on a daily basis, regardless of their job description, to make sure that we're doing a good job for our students, that we're doing the best job we can to educate our students, and we're going to continue to try to do that. We may have to do things differently. We may have to do things with more community help and engagement, but we're here to serve our students, and we all believe in that mission.
And I think that's the perfect way to end this show. Thanks to each of you for joining us today. And thank you for joining us. We're going to wrap up today's show with those comments. Parents, remember always to be there for your child every day. We'll see you next month.